Well, welcome to our next episode of Made by You podcast. As you already know, I'm your host, Deni, and today we have another very interesting topic to talk about, working overseas. So for all of you who are interested in this international career, this episode is exactly for you. And I have a super special guest with me today who is an expert in traveling around the globe while also studying and while also working. Livia will tell us more about her journey and about her adventures. But before we get to this point, I just want to give you a bit of introduction to who she is. And she's originally from Italy, but she swapped the warm climate to a very cold beauty of Denmark, where she moved last year with Mars. And she started her career in Italy, but also spent a year in Brussels. And now she's a category manager for Norway. So she's working all the way up to the north, coming from a very nice south place. And I think your life, Livia, it's full of adventures up until this point. You've been part of very fun, exciting adventures, as we've discussed before, of traveling across Europe without a phone and without any budget, getting from Stockholm to Amsterdam as part of big companies' adventure challenge. So I'm sure you can also tell us more about this somewhere in the episode. But I'm super excited to have you, and please let me know if I have missed any of your traveling adventures in this introduction.
Hi, Danny. Thank you so much. No, thanks. It was a super good introduction. It's only when somebody starts speaking of all these countries in a row that you realize to how many places you've been. But actually, before I joined Mars, I was abroad already 3 times because of high school and university. So I have accumulated quite a lot of experience from that front.
Wow, I can imagine. And I think uh, everyone who is listening to us now would be super curious to hear how you have managed, what you have learned, and what do you see as the benefits or advantages, or maybe some challenges along the way.
Yeah, no, and super exciting topic. So thanks so much for inviting me here. And it will be a really good conversation for both fronts because you have experience on these as well that we can definitely talk about.
Yeah, super. So before we start and before we get to the more challenging and deep questions, I just have a little warm up for you, and I want to ask you a few questions just to set the scene. And my first curiosity for this would be if you prefer the cold weather or if you prefer a warm weather.
What a rhetorical question, I would say. I definitely prefer warm weather. I would say there's definitely a correlation with the fact that I'm Italian. I wasn't raised in the most warm climate in Italy because I still come from somewhere nearby the mountains. So it was still quite cold in the winter, but nevertheless, sunny and still quite mild. So it was pretty tough to get used to the Danish weather at the moment. And but then you get other things. There's always pros and cons. I always say that if Denmark was warmer, it would definitely be a perfect country for me. So it's a compromise on that front. Yes.
I completely understand and relate with this. And my second warm up question would be for everyone who is listening to us right now. I actually have set a small deal for Livia before we start with the podcast, and that's for her to bring something she really likes from Denmark, some food that it's a local food, and to tell us what is so special about it and why does she like it. So I hope you have it ready.
Yeah, I came prepared. I've
Great.
actually just finished baking it. So I just made one. So this call it Able's Kiwa. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to try it yet in Denmark. So it actually translates if you take it literally into like small like apple slices. Although yeah, it has a bit of an apple flavor, but it's not like a mainly apple ingredient kind of dessert. It's a dessert that is probably best compared with like a round pancake. And I like it. I mean, it tastes amazing, so that's a part of it. But I just like it because it's, a Danish tradition that is associated with Christmas, good times, being together, and making winter more cozy. And we'll have more chances to talk about that because I feel like it's a recurring theme in the country. So yeah, it's also very symbolic, not only tasty. So that's what I would say. I would recommend it to try it and warm.
I think that's a dangerous slope because if I've tried it once, I might not be able to stop. So, but thanks for I know what I'm doing after the podcast. Okay, so thank you so much for showing us this very local and special thing about Denmark. And now we can actually spin our wheel and proceed to the other questions. So if you're ready, let's see what other question you get for today.
Let's do it.
Okay, so here is our first question for you. And it is, what do you love about being in Copenhagen and what do you miss the most about being home?
Oh, key question.
Yes.
So Copenhagen overall, I think it's a very welcoming city. I love that it's a capital, so it has a lot to offer. There's always so much to do in terms of like activities, dining, big on dining, shopping, and so on. But it's also small, so you don't feel lost, and you still get a sense of, you can get around the city and you know what's around. And I find that very calming and safe. So I love that about the city. Um, I do miss obviously all the part on food and weather, which I think it's a typical expat Italian answer when we're away. And I think overall just the feeling that people get you. I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that, but I feel like every time I go home, I can fully let myself go in terms of, I know that people will get my jokes, my Italian joke, or, referencing to Italian culture and just maybe some linguistic expressions of way of sayings that we have that sometimes I translate to English and they are not just very well understood abroad. And I think yes, Italians also have like, a tendency to complain sometimes and just certain way that we behave that is like fully understood by others when you're in your own country, but when you're abroad you kind of have to pay a bit more attention on how you act and the kind of things you say because people may not understand in the same way. So I miss that from home.
Yeah, I can completely resonate and understand this part because I think humor is such a key thing, especially when you're integrating somewhere. And I have to say, I have been also finding it hard to put across my jokes being in Denmark. But anything else, it's also very different. So I think that's good also in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to mention my family, of course. Like maybe I should have put it first when I say what you miss from home, but that's obviously a big part that unfortunately you can't bring over, but you just learn to adapt with video calls and just inviting them over pretty often.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And well, speaking of being in Denmark and integrating into the culture and just getting used to the country, I have to ask you, like, if you have three words to really describe this country and your experience here, what would they be? I know it's a hard question, but just out of
Yeah.
curiosity.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is actually what I was saying before about the Danish dessert. So cozy. I would actually define Denmark as a cozy country. They have this like unmatched capability of making pretty mundane things feel pretty special. Obviously, since 6 months of the year, it's a pretty tough weather and it can get very dark. Then they're just very good at having soft music at home and lighting up candles, and all their restaurants are just made to be so like welcoming and a fireplace or a fake fireplace, and they play a lot of board games even in family settings, and I just love that they're very good at making the everyday life a bit more cozy and special. There's a special word in Denmark for that called hygge, which could be translated in English like cozy. And so when you come to Denmark, you will have all of this merch saying hygge everywhere because now it has become kind of the slogan for Denmark. So that would be one. Then I would say welcoming. So as I was referencing before, I've lived in a lot of countries before. Outside of Italy, this is my fifth, but this is also the place where I felt the most welcomed. They're so good at just, yeah, the attitude that I would say that they have towards expats is just very positive, and they also speak English so well. So I've never had an instance where, at the beginning you cannot get around or you cannot order on a menu or stuff, situations like that, because you don't know the local language, because they will always translate for you, and they speak completely fluent at every age level. It's super impressive. And I remember when I came to Denmark and I was registering, coming in the country, for kind of your visa in a way, there was this building that outside said in huge capital letters, "You're welcome to Denmark." And I don't know, it's just these sweet things that they do that I'm like, wow, I'm welcome to Denmark. I really felt that, you wouldn't have that in all the immigration offices around Europe or in other places. And that's kind of the attitude they've always had. I love that. And then third, maybe like balanced, I was
Yeah.
thinking. And that's on every front. Like obviously work-life balance, they're known for that. But I would say they're also balanced on like how the society works. You have access to everything at every social class level. Gender equality is so big.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, that's such an insightful and really great to hear from your personal experience, like how you have experienced the country. Because I think for all of us and moving, and everyone who is listening who is moving countries, I think this part of being welcomed in the country is so important.
Yeah.
But also the whole integration process of it, while studying, while working, while joining a new company, it's so important that you feel like you're welcome there, and it's warm, and it's nice, and you can find a community that supports that. So it's super happy to hear that you had this experience, and anyone who is planning also to move to that country would probably hear you completely innocently advertising it,
Yeah.
but in the best way possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for Denmark, so I will I'm willingly be a sponsor from the way I will talk about it.
Hello and welcome to the Made by You podcast, brought to you by Mars. In this series, we'll talk about all the things related to Mars early careers, from advice and top tips to milestones and some surprising stories. So, if you're looking to grasp your future with both hands and make products that the world loves, search for a role at careers.mars.com. Well, that's I think perfect, because then I really want to know, since you have been part of different offices of Mars in Europe, and you have seen also different locations, lived there, worked there. You said you're a big advocate of the country, and how is this for you, being working in Denmark for Mars, and what you learn from all of these like different locations that you spent with Mars so far?
Like working here, I would say it's great. Like you get the Mars context and the Mars career and everything you would get in other offices, coupled with all of that balance element and welcoming element. So that it's been super great. Again, work-life balance is impressive, and also just their focus on your energy level, and having with at least a monthly recurrence some fun activities in the office. Just as we speak tomorrow, we will have our Mars Be Well day, and we will have this, for example, a yoga session of 1 hour with an instructor in the office. It's very impressive how much attention they put on these things, on the employees, just happiness and well-being. So I think that's super good. And then yeah, their colleagues have been super welcoming. Even there's never been an instance where I walk in the coffee corner and people are speaking Danish and they don't immediately switch to English. They always do that. Like it's almost like they see me coming from 20 meters and they have already switched in English even before I get there. It's the sweetest thing. Obviously, it poses some challenges at this point because I'm really trying to learn Danish, and right now I'm more of like intermediate, almost advanced level, where I would really love to start talking to them in Danish. but because they don't want me to, struggle or feel like I need to put extra effort or impress anybody, then they always tend to speak to me in English, which I know comes from a very good place. So yeah, it's great. And then yeah, there's obviously differences between the other locations. That Mars element, I would say, would always stay the same. So it's only the culture that would change in terms of maybe how work gets done. I know in Italy, for example, where I've been in Mars for 1 year, it's very much based on more like interpersonal relation. It's just how us Italians get things done. So it's more about, having a bit of a personal chat at the beginning of the meeting, and, having, yeah, more of an interpersonal relationship with others that comes even before business. Whereas I would say in Denmark is a bit of the opposite. It's very much like sharp and efficient. It's not like people don't care about you, but the way that they approach work is just
Yeah.
yeah, more imprinted on the efficiency.
Yeah. Wow. So you must have learned a lot to change gears between having these interpersonal connections, but at the same time dealing with completely different ways of working in a more, let's say, Nordic countries. Or how was it in Brussels? How was the culture there?
Yeah, it was something in between. It's quite interesting. I always felt like going in Brussels last year before moving to Denmark. Oh, at this point, it's almost 2 years ago. Wow, time is flying. It almost felt like a natural bridge in between cultures, because there's still that, element of, yeah, interpersonal relationships and more, chatty coffee corners and longer lunch breaks as I'm used to in Italy, but they were also very efficient in the business structure. So it was a good bridge, I would say, a good in between the more southern and northern cultures.
Amazing, and it's great with what you're mentioning, that this Mars element of the culture kind of remains. It's just more of the culture of the people that changes, but it's great to always come back to some values that seem to be sticking quite a lot, regardless of the location. Or at least that's what I'm understanding from your experience, and it's very nice to hear because I have a similar observations.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely been like that for me. And that actually is one of the positive things for me about moving countries within the same company, is that it allows you to have at least one element in your life that is not changing, because you're moving to a new country where you start from scratch on all different elements, on, new friends and new city and new apartment and sometimes new currencies and new
Yeah.
everything, new hobbies, new city. Like, you have so much to take in. Whereas having Mars at least be, the recurring element across these different countries has helped, because at least when you go to work, you know what people are talking about. There's some small tweaks, of course, that you will have to do. Sometimes terminology may change a little bit, but otherwise it does feel like, you're bringing a part of yourself to the other place, and it's been very comforting from that perspective. Yeah.
Wow, sounds so great, and I would absolutely love to dig deeper into your international experience. So please let me have another spin on our questions and see what else you get after. Okay, so here is our next question. I think it's a super interesting one, because we got where is your dream place to work? And
Ooh.
without spoiling too much, I think the past couple of minutes we've been advertising Denmark quite well, but maybe you surprise us.
I think I will actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I hope Denmark is not listening to me as a whole, all the citizens of Denmark. But I did live in Singapore for 6 months while I was on exchange. And I do think that Singapore would be like my place on earth, if only it wasn't so far away. So that's why I don't feel too bad on betraying Denmark on this particular answer, because maybe Denmark would be next in line just as a second. But Singapore had so many things to it. It obviously has the weather element that Denmark is missing on. It also is very international. So it's kind of the travel hub of Southeast Asia. So, it has an influence of so many cultures in it. You have people really coming from all around, and as well as a huge expat community. So big international element. You can travel everywhere, so many places that are amazing. Like you would have Bali and Cambodia next to it. So that's super great. And then the official language is English. So that makes it super easy for an expat to come in the job market, and but just in general in society, because you understand everything that's going on, which obviously can be a bit tricky in Asia with different alphabets that you would have to learn otherwise for the local language. So yeah, I was really happy while I was there, and I would really consider one day moving there, but I would not consider it for more than a short period of time, like 2 to 3 years, just because it's just so far away, and I would miss that element of being able to visit my family and friends on a almost monthly basis. When you're so far, it would be less than once a year, then it's a bit too little for me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm definitely surprised with this answer, but it's super interesting to hear because you have quite a lot of experience not only in Europe but obviously also in Asia, and I quite like that you've touched also a bit on maybe the challenges that comes with it, and one of which is being quite far from home, or having to deal with. Different language, different culture. But I also got quite interested to hear from your perspective. How did that really stretched you, and how developed you personally? Being living in so many countries, having this international career, keep on thinking that you can probably even keep on traveling or keep on building your career overseas.
It's definitely in the picture, not in the short term. I feel like I've been into so many places now that I kind of feel that I want to settle in one place for now. But it's very hard going from being super international into being in the same place for multiple years in a row. So I know that element of wanting to go to the next place will come back. I just don't know when, but whenever it will be, I'll be ready for the next challenge. And then regarding your first part, well, it's you learn to be independent. I would say that's definitely the biggest lesson, because you start from scratch, as we said before, but you have to do it alone. So you kind of need to yeah, you're a bit of outside of your comfort zone, and you kind of need to accept that. And I remember in the first days in Belgium, I was still staying in a hotel while I was looking in my apartment, and I didn't have a kitchen. So I was going out to eat at restaurants alone. And back then I thought this was huge. I was like, I would have never done this before in Italy. I would have felt so judged by others. But then at the end, you do it once, you do it twice, and then you start enjoying it. And actually, even after I had, my own network of friends and my hobbies and my apartment settled with a great roommate and everything, I was still going to the cinema alone, for example, at least once a month. Because at that point, I got so used to, having this independent element of myself, that it's something I enjoyed doing, that I would actually, actively seek out for. So yeah, the biggest lesson is definitely that, enjoying time with yourself, and learning to do things on your own.
Well, that's definitely something that resonates with me. And I have to also add that at least in my journey of going abroad, studying abroad, and working also overseas with Mars now, I think there is always an element of being slightly maybe scared, but also excited. I think it's a mixture of how would you integrate, how would you be accepted to the new place, but at the same time, like I think the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and you build this independence, as you said, and agility, very high agility to adapt.
Yeah, and you learn to also see the positive things of it. Um, for example, one of the things, as you say, of getting excited of starting in a new place for me was always that I felt like I had a blank canvas. I'm like, I'm gonna go to this new place where I need to choose everything new, right? So this time I want my apartment to be more, I don't know, next to a park. And this time I want to be the girl who goes to dance class 3 times a week after work. And I don't know, you can kind of reinvent yourself in so many different ways, because you have the opportunity to start from zero, and you can choose new hobbies. You can choose how you want to meet your friends and what kind of people you want to hang out with. So you can kind of it's quite fun when you're young. I think constantly reinvent yourself and almost building different realities within your life. I think that's been the good side of it. Definitely, it does have its stressful elements. I can't deny that, but it can also be really fun.
And what does it really help you get through these stressful elements?
Yeah, well, I wish I had a quick answer for it. I've had to learn the hard way. I think just having at home, actually, more than where you are, having like a very strong base of people you love. Because at the end of the day, I could tell you that what's going to help you is yourself and meditating and I don't know, meeting more people where you are. Like, there's so many things you can do. But in reality, at the end of it, when I was really struggling, it was always calling my parents, calling my boyfriend, calling my grandma, calling my best friends, or going to visit them or asking them to come over. So there's always that element of trying as much as possible to maintain and foster those relationships all the time because they're going to be so important. And it's not just, I mean, of course, they're going to give you a lot. It's not just there for help when you need it, but overall, they're, next to you, even if you're far away. So it's something that I would constantly continue investing in and top one priority, even now that I'm in Denmark.
That's amazing, and I think all of us can relate with this, and it's so nice that you're saying it. And what can I say? I think we can talk so much about your experience, and probably this relatively short episode will not be enough. But I just want to really wrap up with one final question for everyone who is considering international career, working overseas. What would be your like advice to those people from your personal perspective?
I think to just try it. From my experience, when I've had this conversation with people before, there were so many concerns coming from people who are considering it on and how do I do that, and how do I find an apartment, and what if this happens, and what if I don't find any friends, and what if I don't like my job. And I think if the more you think about it, the bigger it gets in your head, then it becomes really, really scary. And you know, there's nobody that forces you to be in that country. I would say go for it, try it, and you can always go back to where you started from if you figure out that it's not for you, but at least you will not have any regrets. And try not to make it bigger in your head than it actually is, because at the end of the day, every time I moved in a new country, 99% of the things I had not figured out. I had no idea how I would get to work. I had no idea what is the right neighborhood to live in. I have no idea what is a normal price to rent an apartment, or what should be my monthly budget, or you probably will not have any idea of most of the things. But it's pretty quickly that you get up to speed with everything. And one person will help you with something that will lead you to something else. And I can assure you that, I mean, you probably must have had the same experience. In a matter of 2 to 3 months, you're usually completely up to speed, and you can definitely have your whole setup in place, and start really enjoying where you are and building your network of friends. So it's really not that complicated. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for saying this, and for these super encouraging words, and of course for taking us through your very powerful palette of like international experiences from Europe to all the way to Asia and back, and to the south, to the north. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, and your really valuable perspectives and tips on how to integrate, but also how to navigate through those maybe things that seem a bit scary at the start. But at the end of the day, as you said, just try it, and it's not that big of a deal. Like, you'll be fine at the end.
Yeah. I hope it was useful for those who are, getting now to start their career and the different things that they're considering. And I hope it's useful advice that maybe I would have loved to hear when I was just moving for the first time abroad. There were no podcasts yet. I'm not that old, but that was 10 years ago. So I didn't have any nice podcasts from Mars to rely on, or other people's experiences to read. Yeah.
I really hope so too, and I'm sure of it, because I would have loved it as well in these shoes like a few years ago. So thank you so much, Livia, and thank you for one more great and super insightful Made by You podcast episode.
Thank you for inviting me, Denny, and yeah, also looking forward to hearing the next episodes from the other guests. It's a really great content, so good job on that, and thanks again.